I'm Rancher C. Acosta Jr. Chapter 1. Title: Philosophical Perspective of the Self. Before we even had to be in any formal institution of learning, among the many things that we first taught as a kid is to articulate and write our names. Growing up, we were told to refer back to these names when talking about ourselves. Were you named after a famous celebrity, a respected politician, a historical personality, or a saint? Our name represent who we are. It is not been accustomed to just randomly pick a combination of letters and numbers, or even punctuation mark, like ZHGK 756, to denote our being. Human beings attach names that are meaningful to bird progenies because names are supposed to designate us in the world. Though some people get baptized with names such as precious, beauty, or lovely. Likewise, when our parents call our names, we were taught to respond to them because our names represent who we are. As a student, we are told to always write our names or on our paper, project, or any output for that matter. Our names signify us that cannot even stop this bond between the person and his or her name. For names are inscribed even into one gravestone. However, a name is not the person itself. No matter how intimately bound it is with the bearer, it is only a signifier. A person who was named after a saint most probably will not become an actual saint. He may not even turn out to be saintly. The self is to be something else than the name. The self is something that a person perennial molds, shape, and develops. The self is not a static thing that one is simply born with a like whole one face or it just assigned by one parent just like a name. Everyone is take to discover oneself. Junior. Philosophy employs the inquisitive mind to discover the ultimate cause, reason, and principles of everything. It goes beyond scientific investigation by exploring all areas of knowledge such as religion, psychology, politics, physics, and even medicine. Hence, the etymological definition of philosophy, love of wisdom, could pertain to the desire for truth by formulating never-ending question. To provide answer to every inquiry about the nature of human existence, the nature of the self is a topic of interesting among philosophers. The philosophical framework for understanding the self was introduced by the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates' unexamined life is not worth a living. For Socrates, the self is synonymous with the soul. He believes that every human possesses an immortal soul that survives the physical body. Socrates was the first to focus on the full power of reason on the human self, who we are, who we should be, and who we will become. He suggests that reality consists of two dichotomous realms, physical and ideal realms. Physical realms, changeable, transient, and imperfect. The physical world in which man lives, as well as the body, belongs here. while ideal realms, unchanging, eternal, perfect, and immortal, includes the intellectual essence of the universe, concepts such as truth, goodness, and beauty. The soul belongs here. Socr- So- Socrates explains that the essence of the self, the soul, is the immortal entity. It strives for wisdom and for perfection, and reason in the soul tool to achieve this exalted state. But then, as long as the soul is tied to the body, the quest for wisdom is inhibited by the imperfection of the physical realms, where it's wonder and it's confused. Socrates though suggests that man must live an examined life and a life of purpose and value. For him, an examined life is not worth living. An individual can have a meaningful and happy life only if he becomes virtuous and knows the value of himself that can be achieved through incessant soul searching. He must begin to the source of all knowledge and significance, the self. The Socrates method, introspection, is a method of carefully examine one through and emotion, thought and emotion, to gain self-knowledge. Plato. The self is an immortal soul. A student of Socrates, Plato elaborates on his teacher's concept of the soul. He believes that the self is synonymous. Specifically, Plato introduced the idea of a three-part soul, self, reason, physical, appetite, and spirit, passion. Reason, or rational soul, is the divine essence of that enables us to think deeply, make wise choice, and achieve a true understanding of internal truth. While physical appetites, or appetitive, includes our basic biological needs such as hunger, thirst, and sexual desire. Spirit and passion, or spirited soul, includes basic emotions such as love, anger, ambition, aggressiveness, and empathy. These three elements of ourself are in a dynamic relationship with one another, sometimes in conflict. When conflict occurs, Plato believes it is the responsibility of reason to sort things out and exert control, restoring an harmonious relationship among the three elements of ourselves. Further, he believes that genuinely happiness can only be achieved by people who consistently make sure that the reason is in control of their spirit and appetites. This harmonious integration under the control of reason is the essence of Plato's concept of justice. As such, if man lives in accordance to his nature, then he is giving justice to his existence. In his theory of form, Plato further elaborates his idea about the soul and introduced the concept of two worlds, the world of form, non-physical ideas, and the world of sense. The world of forms, real and permanent. The world of scenes or reality, temporary or a replica of the ideal world. Plato claims that the sensible world is dependent on the ideal world where the concept of the soul belongs. Since soul is regarded as something permanent, man should give more importance to it than physical body which resides in the world of sense. Aristotle, the soul is the essence of the self. Another Greek philosopher, Aristotle believes that the soul is merely a set of defining futures, that the soul is futures that does not consider the body and soul as separate entities. He suggests that anything with life has soul. The soul is the essence of all living. Thus, the soul is the essence of the self. However, humans differ from other living things because of their capacity for rational thinking. His discussion about the self certain of the three kinds of soul possessed by man: negative, sensual, and rational. Negative soul includes that physical body can grow. Sensual soul includes sensual desire, feelings, and emotion. Rational soul is what makes man human and includes the intellect that allows man to know and understand things. Those Aristotle suggests that the rational nature of the self is to lead in good, flourishing, and fulfilling life, self-actualization. The pursuit of happiness is a search of good life that includes doing virtuous action. In saying this, he possessed that part of the rational soul is characterized by moral virtues such as justice and courage.
Okay, good day everyone. But first of all, I'm gonna introduce myself first. My name is Rian Trisha and Lampayan, and today I'm going to report about the different philosophers and their ideas about the self. These philosophers are Saint Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Rene Descartes, and I will begin to discuss it. Good day, everyone. My name is Rian Trisha and Anampayan, and today I'm going to report about the different philosophers and their ideas about self. These philosophers are Saint Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Rene Descartes, and each of them had different beliefs about what make us who we are. So the first philosopher was Saint Augustine. The self has an immortal soul, which is the African philosopher, which is Augustine, is regarded as a saint, which means santo. Isa po na siya ka santo. And also Saint Augustine of Hippo in the Catholic Church. And also he integrated the ideas of Plato and teaching of Christianity. And also, Augustine believes that the physical body is radically different from inferior to its inhabitant, the immortal soul. And his thinking matured, and also he developed a more unfied perspective on the body and also the soul. And he ultimately came to view the body as spouse of the soul, both attached to one another by a natural appetite. And he believes that the body is united with the soul so that man may be entire and complete. And nevertheless, as a religious philosopher, he contemplates on the nature of man with emphasis on the soul as an important element of man. And he believes that the soul is that governs and defines as man. Yes, and his work, Confessions, Augustine described that humankind is created in the image and likeness of God. We are likeness of God. We are beautiful and handsome. Everything created by God, who is all good, is good. Therefore, human person being a creation of God is always geared towards the good. Means Augustine is convinced that the self is known only through knowing God, when accordingly self-knowledge is a consequence of knowledge of God. But Augustine espouses the significance of reflection. as well as the importance of prayers and confession to arrive at justification for the extenses of God. And also for him, knowledge can only come by seeing the truth that dwells within us. The truth of which Augustine speaks refers to the fruit of knowledge by God, and God is transcendent. The self seeks to be united by God through faith and reason. In his mission, in his mission to discover the truth of the existence of God, Augustine develops the fundamental concept of the human person, and thus provides the philosophical principle, I am doubting, therefore I am. Which means, let's proceed to St. Augustine, which means the self as an immortal soul, which means he believed that the soul is more important than the body because the soul lives forever even after the body dies, which means even we are dead, the souls, uh, the body are in the souls, which means according to him, the body and soul are connected, but the soul is the real self because it is the one that thinks, loves, and knows God. He also said that we can only understand ourselves by understanding God, since God is the one who created us. Which means, for Saint Augustine, I think our true self is our soul, and we can only know who we are through in God. So let's proceed to Thomas Aquinas. I don't know what pronounce Aquinas, but I read it Aquinas or Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas or Aquinas. So the soul is what animates the body, which is Aquinas, the most eminent, the 13th century scholar and stalwart of the medieval philosophy, appended something to St. Augustine's Christian view, adopting ideas for Aristotle. Aquinas said that indeed man is composed of two parts, matter and form, which is the soul gives life to body. Thomas Aquinas, also Christian philosopher who follows some of which mean Augustine ideas. And also he influenced Aristotle too. Aquinas said that every human is made of two parts, the body and the soul, which means the body is the physical part that we can see, while the soul is the part that gives life and reason to the body. And also, he explained that the soul and body work together. The soul cannot exist on earth without body, and the body cannot live without soul. So, based on what Thomas Aquino, there are two parts that he said, which is the two parts is matter and form, which is matter is physical stuff, which is the body. It what things in the universe are made of. For example, our body is made of cells, just like animals and other living things, which is even though our matter is in physical stuff, we are like dogs, cats, in animals, there are cells, there are hands, their hair, eyes, nose, mouth, but they can talk. But we are know that they talk without um, using sounds. And the last one is form, which is what gives something this its identity. Um, so what makes it what is for people is form called soul, which is I know that soul is kalag. Our soul is inside our body. Yes. For example, um, you're sleeping and then you have a dream that you saw yourself and then your soul is out of your body, which means you saw your whole body in that particular area and like, oh, that's my body. Oh, how can I get out that body? And naam ko diri, which is your soul is out of your body, which means that is soul. So let's proceed to based on Aquinas. Based on Aquinas, in case of human person, the body is something that he shares even with animals. The cells in man body are more or less the same to cell of any other living organic being in the world. However, what makes a human person a human and not a dog or a tiger in his soul? His senses. To Aquinas, just as for Aristotle, the soul is what animates body and what makes us human. That's that's what Thomas Aquinas said, which is so according to Aquinas, the soul is what gives the body. It makes us truly human. Without the soul, the body is just a collection of cells, like any other animals. Even though our bodies are similar to animals in many ways, what makes us different is our soul, our ability to think, choose, and understand right from wrong. That's make us human. Um, the body is physical part, and the soul is spiritual part that gives the body life and purpose. That was for Thomas Aquinas, and let's proceed to René Descartes. So let's proceed to René Descartes. There, I think, therefore I am. French. And René Descartes, the René Descartes is a French philosopher, which is in the father of modern philosophy. He has both an entirely new perspective to philosophy and the self. He wanted to penetrate the nature of reasoning process and understand its relationship to the human self. The Latin phrase cogito, ergo sum. From Latin word, it's cogito, ergo sum. But in English, I think, therefore I am, is the keystone of Descartes' concept of the self. And for him, the act of thinking about the self, of being self-conscious, is in itself proof that there is self. He is confident that no rational person will doubt his or her own existence as a conscious thinking entity while we are aware of thinking about ourselves. For Descartes, this is the existence of human self, a thinking entity that doubts, understanding, analyze, and question and reason. He considered further that if man reflects truthfully, he will realize that there are two dimensions of the human self, the self-thinking entity and the self of physical body. In particular, he introduced that ideas of thinking self or soul is non-material and non-material mortal conscious. It's being independent of physical laws of the universe. In contrast, the physical body is material, mortal, non-thinking entity, fully governed by the physical laws of nature. In other words, the soul, the body are independent of one another, and each of can exist, function without other. No. The essential self, the self as a thinking entity, it is distinct from the self as physical body. Simply put, thinking self can't exist independent of a physical body.
John Locke. John Locke was one of the most influential English philosophers of the Enlightenment period. Known as the father of liberalism, his idea about government, knowledge, and human rights greatly shaped modern democracy, political thought, and education. For English philosopher John Locke, the human mind at birth is tabula rasa, or a blank slate. He feels that the self or personal identity is constructed primarily from sense experiences, or more especially what people see, hear, smell, taste, and feel. These experiences shape and mold the self throughout a person's life. Conscious awareness and memory of previous experiences are the keys to understanding the self. Locke believes that the essence of the self is its conscious awareness of itself as a thinking, reasoning, and reflecting identity. Consciousness accompanies thinking and makes possible that concept that people have of a self. Self-consciousness is necessary to have a coherent personal self-identity or knowledge of the self as a person. Consciousness of what makes identity of a person similar or different situations. Love purposes that people could use the power of reason to gain knowledge and consequently use this knowledge to understand experiences. Knowledge is based on careful observation of experiences. Reason plays an important role in helping to figure out the significance of sense experience and to reach intelligent conclusions. Those using the power of reason and introspection enables one to understand achieve accurate conclusion about the self or personal identity. John Locke's contributions to philosophy and politics made him one of the history's most important thinkers. His ideas about the mind, government, and education helped shape the values of freedom and human rights that define the modern world. Dave Hume was a Scottish philosopher, historian, and essayist known as one of the most important figures of the Enlightenment. He is best remembered for his ideas about human understandings, emotion, and skepticism toward traditional views of knowledge and religions. Scottish philosopher Dave Hume suggests that if people carefully examine their sense experience through the process of introspection, they will discover that there is no self. Accordingly, what people experience is just a bundle or collection of different perceptions. Hume maintains that if people carefully examine the extent of their experience, they will find that there are only distinct entities, expressions, and ideas. Impressions are the basic sensation of people experience, such as hate, love, joy, grief, pain, cold, and heat. Impressions are vivid perception and are strong and lively. Ideas, however, are thoughts and images from impressions, so they are less lively and vivid. Different sensations are in a constant continuum that is invariable and not constant. Hume argues that it can't be from any of these impressions that the idea of self is derived, and consequently there is no self. Hume's skeptical claim on this issue is that people have no experience of a simple and individual impression that they can call the self, where the self is the totality of a person's conscious life. Subsequently, the idea of personal identity is a result of imagination. So, Dave Hume deep skepticism focused on experiences and understanding of human emotion made him one of the most brilliant minds of the Enlightenment. His ideas challenge traditional beliefs and the way of modern science and philosophy.
Hi ma'am, I'm Mark Johnson Eclaveria and I'm going to report about the three philosophers Immanuel Kant, Gilbert Ryle, and Sigmund Freud. So Immanuel Kant and his theory, we construct the self. So Immanuel Kant is a German philosopher. Immanuel Kant believes that the self is an organizing principle that makes unified and intelligible experience possible. So we construct the self means the self is an active synthesizing agent that organizes and makes sense of an experience and perception, creating unified and intelligible reality. So Immanuel Kant proposed that the self is not merely a recipient of experience but an active organizing principle. For Kant, the self is the essential structure that make a stable and unified experience of the world. So, example. So, imagine you look at a scattered pile of wooden blocks of various color and shape. So, in Kant's view, yourself or unconsciousness immediately organize those sensation, colors, shape into unified, understandable object. So in Immanuel Kant kanang murag kung natay makita nga something nga dili kuan bitaw sa atong kaugalingon is murag ang una natong mahinduman mauna-unahan is mag-organize sa atong kaugalingon. So mo na ang kang Immanuel Kant. So second is si Sigmund Freud. So si Sigmund Freud is not classified as philosopher but is psychoanalytic. So psychoanalytic means a form of therapy that explore unconscious thoughts, feelings, and memories. So Sigmund Freud believed that the self is composed of three distinct layers. First is conscious self or the reality principle. So conscious self operate according to the reality principle means mo ni siya ang mga nahitabo sa ato like in practical and present nga nahitabo sa atoa like sa atong pagbata nga na mga nahitabo na to mga emotional mga romance na una. So second is the unconscious self. So unconscious self or pleasure principle. So pleasure principle contains fantasy, emotion, thoughts, taboo, feelings. So in unconscious self is diri na nanto ang makita ang kanang murag atong mga feelings nga nahinduman sa una mga nabati na to. So Sigmund Freud argued that ang atong kaugalingon is more na belong sa unconscious self. Third is pre-conscious self, also known as foreconscious. So pre-conscious self present the layer of mental activity is not correctly within conscious awareness, but repeatedly available and easily recalled. So, for example for Sigmund Freud is Mark often oversees and stress when has an irritation fear, international irrational fear of crowded people or crowded places. So in conscious self, Mark over overeating in unhealthy and makes rational plan. So in unconscious, Mark seek comfort. So diri na musud ang unconscious self where mag-seek tag comfort kay tungod sa nabati nato nga stress, fear. So that is when stress that is primal drive to seek pleasure. So to seek pleasure is mo na siya ang unconscious. So in the conscious self, Mark may not be urgently thinking about something but can easily recall when asked. For example, kung pangutanon siya something nga kanang sa una pa nahitabo is dali ra niya na ma-answer o ma-recall. So last is si Gilbert Ryle. So Gilbert Ryle is a British philosopher, believes that the self best understood as a pattern behavior, which means the self is the totality of the person's action, emotion, and thoughts. Ryle's concept of human self provides the philosophical principle I act therefore I am, which means the self is not a hidden, non-physical but the public observable patterns of a person behavior or action. So in Gilbert Ryle's, so ang mga people is tanan na nga nagpalibot na to is full of patterns, which means dali na to ma-determine kung unsa man jud ni nga klase nga tao because of patterns sa ilang mga gilihok nga mapansin nato. So for example, we describe Sarah as being a kind and diligent person. So in Ryle's view, the self is into a hidden, invisible mind or soul that causes the behavior. Instead, the self is the observable pattern of the behavior. So the in her consistent action. So kindness is murag may nakita nga pattern. And diligent is her tendency to do work hard. So that is Gilbert Ryle nga ang mga tao is iyang belief is ang mga tao is dali ra ma-determine ang mga behavior through sa ilang gipakita nga action nga nay mga
Hello everyone, my name is Julian the Second Doctor, and today I'm going to continue about the lesson Philosophical Perspective of the Self. So, Paul Churchland, the self is the brain. Canadian philosopher Paul Churchland advocates the idea of unlimited materialism or the idea that the self is inseparable from the brain and the physiology of the body. All a person has is the brain, and so if the brain is gone, there is no self. For Churchland, the physical brain and not the imaginary mind gives people the sense of self. The mind does not really exist because it cannot be experienced by the senses. Maurice Merleau-Ponty, the self is embodied subjectivity. French philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty argues that all knowledge about the self, phenomena of experience, the I, is a single integrated core identity, a combination of mental, physical, and emotional structures around a core identity of the self. He further articulates that when people examine the self at the fundamental level of direct human experience, people will discover the mind and body are unified, not separate. He notes in his book, Phenomenology of Perception, that everything that people are aware of is contained within the consciousness. Consciousness is a dynamic form responsible for actively structuring conscious ideas and physical behavior. He is convinced that consciousness, the world, and the human body are intricately intertwined in perceiving the world. For him, perception is not merely a consequence of sensory experience, rather, it is a conscious experience. Thus, the self is embodied subjectivity. That's all. Thank you.